Hello everyone, and welcome to the first video of the online Gender and Women's Studies 200 course, Women in Western Culture. My name is Alex Karaman. I'm a graduate student in the Department of Gender and Women's Studies at the University of Arizona. I'm in my 5th year of the PhD program there, so I'm pretty close to getting done and being a official PhD and on the search for jobs. But as many of you well know, as many of you have already taken classes with graduate students, a lot of us teach in our department. This isn't my first time teaching this course. It's actually the third time that I've taught it. I've taught it online before during the summer, and I've also taught it in person before during the regular semester. So I'm really excited to be offering it in this condensed online course. So one thing I want to say before I get started, so everybody knows, is that I'm trying something new this semester where I'm making these lectures on video. And don't worry, this isn't going to be a lecture. This is just an overview of the syllabus and of, a quick introduction to the course. So no need to take notes or anything. But this time what I'm going to be doing is filming all the lectures and actually putting them up on YouTube as well. So some of you watching this might be in the class online this spring of 2017 semester, but other folks might be watching it on YouTube right now, later this year, 5 years from now, I don't even know. So for those of you who are in the class, approach this like you would any other online class. We have the syllabus, we have our online D2L site that we're going to be using for class discussions, submitting assignments, etc. But for those of you who might be watching at home on YouTube, this is kind of a do-it-yourself course where you can follow it at whatever pace you choose. Just watch the lectures and watch them with the PowerPoint presentations that should be posted below. And follow along in the PowerPoint presentations. We're also including the syllabus, which will be attached below on this video. And for other videos, we're going to have the discussion questions up on the YouTube page as well in the description beneath the video. So as you progress through the course, you can look and see, okay, well, for the students who were taking this online at the U of A, what discussion questions were they talking about online? Of course, for all of my students at the U of A, please always bother me at my UA email account with whatever sort of questions you might have. And for those of you who are watching at home from YouTube and following along at your own pace, feel free to contact me if you would like to with any sort of questions you have. But obviously, if for some reason tons of people start watching these videos, I won't be able to keep up with all the emails that I get that aren't from my students at the U of A. So, with that, so you can be prepared to follow along with the rest of this intro video, I just request that you have either on your computer screen in front of you or printed out in front of you a copy of the syllabus for the course. So if you have it on your computer screen in front of you, you can just take this screen that I'm on and size me down and move me to the side and have your syllabus up next to it so that you can be, hearing what I'm saying and watching me while I'm also working through the syllabus. Later on in this video, after I talk through the syllabus for the course, all of which pertains to the U of A students and not all of which pertains to those at home. But at the end of this, I'm going to talk the UA students through our D2L site page. So if you are watching at home on YouTube, you can feel free to end the video at that point, because from then on, we're only going to be looking at something that's relevant to the UA students. But for those of you at the U of A during this online course, make sure you're watching all the way to the end of this video. Alrighty, so right now you should have pulled up in front of you the syllabus for the course. So I'm just going to work down it from the top. I'm going to read off of it a tiny bit and talk through everything that's important. So, first off, at the top, obviously, we're Gender and Women's Studies 200, a class titled Women in Western Culture. Again, my name's Alex Karaman. This semester, even though the class is online, I am going to be doing in-person office hours, so you can find me in my office, which is office number 105 or room 105B in the Gender and Women's Studies department building. I suggest you use a map ahead of time and look up our address, 925 North Tyndall Avenue, to find us, because our office is located kind of slightly off campus, kind of behind like the stretch of university that has all the restaurants and shops and stuff on it. So, as a small aside, something that will be important for the first month of the course is, since I'm teaching online, I'm also going to be doing field research during a chunk of this semester. So from March 1st until April 10th, I'm going to be in Israel and in Palestine doing field work. But after that point, I'll be back in town. So if you want to do office hours while I'm gone by appointment, we'll do them over Skype or over telephone. But once I'm back in town on the 10th of April, we can do all of those office hours in person. So I'm going to start by reading the course description out loud so you can just follow along with me at home. So this course will introduce students to a range of approaches to understanding the term culture, from feminist accounts of the representation of women in U.S. pop culture to scholarship on the anti-racist, countercultural practices of female hip-hop and punk musical artists. The class will draw from critical theory, novels and poetry, films, music, videos, television shows, and visual art, and will require students to analyze cultural artifacts of their own choosing. This course proceeds through 3 units, each intended to build on the previous unit while pushing towards a more critical and nuanced understanding of culture and its various meanings, uses, and contents. The first unit focuses on feminist critiques of mainstream U.S. Western cultures on subjects ranging from body image and eating disorders to heteronormativity and transphobia. The second unit moves on to survey modes of what we'll call countercultural production and consumption as responses to sexist, racist, homophobic, transphobic, and nationalist U.S. cultural practices. Now, the final unit is going to trouble the physical and theoretical borders of this concept of the West, which is in the title of the course, to really address how this current transnational moment promotes the globalization of Western culture. In other words, to be in Western culture doesn't necessarily mean to be in the political or geographic borders of what's considered to be the West, and there's other ways of being immersed in Western culture. And we're going to talk about this in ways that focus on both the practice of cultural imperialism, which we'll talk more about, but also the forms of resistance that it informs within the purview of the Middle East specifically. Now, why, you might ask, do I focus a little bit heavily in this course on the Middle East when looking outside of the geographical borders of the West? Well, the reason is because my field work and my dissertation work is on Palestinian hip-hop culture. So I am a Palestinian American. My dad's whole family is from Palestine, and most still live within Palestine and Israel. And my mom's family is European, from Hungary and Norway, but she was born here in the United States. So depending on how you look at it, I'm either first generation or second generation. But I've always had a great love of hip-hop culture. And that was really added on to with the years that I spent living in Long Beach, California, a place that has a really close-knit history with U.S. hip-hop. And over time, because of the fact that in Palestine, hip-hop culture is a place where there's a lot of emphasis on feminist values and on LGBTQ focused progressive messaging, I thought it would be a good research project to study Palestinian hip-hop. So that's what I do, and therefore this will give me an opportunity to teach some of the stuff that I know really well, and I think you'll all find it to be very, very interesting to read about the Middle East, and in particular to read about Palestinian hip-hop culture. So, this course has a few goals in mind, both for those of you who are taking it at home over YouTube and those of you who are in the class. So first is to engage students in the rigorous study of contemporary debates and methods of inquiry through sufficient required readings, lectures, visual text, films, and music. Next is to focus on critical evaluative thinking, and this will be really important for the course because you'll notice I stress in all of my assignment descriptions in the syllabus that we'll cover is that I don't want you to be focusing on summarizing the readings. I want you to be focusing on evaluating them and using them critically to be able to make various arguments or connections between other ideas and concepts. Next is to promote independent, creative, and interactive learning. Obviously, since this class is being taught online, there are some barriers to those forms of interaction, so we're trying to work around them by using the D2L discussion pages, which we'll cover later. And for those of you who are watching at home on YouTube, I invite you to use the comment section below to be able to start asking questions to me, to other people, and to develop discussions around the stuff that we're talking about and reading. So, finally, we're looking to engage students in discussion of course topics and materials. Very straightforward. This course does have a textbook For those of you at home, for those of you in the class, this is definitely considered to be required reading. So I'm going to talk a lot about the readings in these lectures. The discussion questions will relate to the readings, and obviously you'll be expected to integrate them into your final and know about them for your midterm exam. So the textbook that we're using is called Gender Through the Prism of Difference. Gender Through the Prism of Difference. So this is a book that's been around for quite a while, a really great edited anthology. And because it's been around for a while, there are multiple editions, but what we're using for this class is the 5th edition. I haven't checked to see whether or not there's enough overlap with the 4th edition. The 5th edition has already been out for a couple years, so I really want folks to get that one. In terms of purchasing it, you can do so at the bookstore at the U of A, and it should be available at the bookstore by the middle of February at the latest. But I also recommend looking online, on Amazon, on other places to find it, because you might find it for even less on there since it has been out for a while. So, in addition to the book, we have other articles and essays that are available on the D2L course page. For those of you who are watching at home and using YouTube to follow along, I suggest you go through the syllabus and use your various contacts to find out different ways of getting the articles. So if you know people who work at universities, you might ask them to look up some of those articles for you. Of course, you can purchase the textbook online, but for all the additional articles that are listed in the D2L syllabus, I encourage you to just work through any sort of academic connections that you might have, people that you know that work at universities, to find those readings. Because anybody who does have institutional access to different databases online should be pretty able to access the majority of the articles that are included in this course. For those of you who are taking the class at the U of A, all of the readings are on the D2L website, but they're also available through the U of A library. So if you were to do a search for the author and the title of any of these articles on the UA library website, you'd be able to find them and look at them on your computer at home as well. Or if you're on the go for any reason, you can download them and print them out from there, just as well as you can use the D2L website for them. We're also going to have another number of films that are used throughout the course, which you're expected to keep up with. For those of you following the course at the U of A, those films are available on the D2L page. There's links to all of the films that are up there already. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, again, I encourage you to use whatever resources you have to track down some of the films, the majority of which are documentaries except for one film, and to watch them on your own. They can be available through libraries, local libraries, for free, and you might get lucky finding a lot of them available online as well. So, besides that, the other materials for this course are twofold, but they go together, and that is the PowerPoint lectures and the videos. So, one of the videos that you're watching right now has the syllabus below for those of you watching on YouTube, or the syllabus online on the D2L site for those of you at the U of A. And in that case, the document that goes along with this video is the syllabus. For all future lectures, the document that goes along with the video is a PowerPoint presentation. So when you watch me lecturing, I'm going to be lecturing through the PowerPoint presentations, which you should also have up at the same time or print out copies of yourself for. So you'll hear me say stuff like, turn to the next slide. You'll hear me reference specific bullet points on the PowerPoint presentations, and that's how you're supposed to follow along. So, the grading for this course, those of you watching on YouTube, no need to worry about this. This isn't for you. But for those of you at the U of A, it definitely is. So the grading for this course is broken into a number of different things. First off is discussion and participation, worth a total of 40% of your grade. So this is broken up into 2 grades, 15% for everything before the midterm and 25% for everything after the midterm. Since this class is in person, you won't participate by vocalizing questions, but you will participate by engaging with the D2L discussion boards. And we'll talk about that in a moment. Next, we have the midterm, which is happening 4 weeks into the semester, and during that midterm, you're going to be taking it online on D2L. It's going to be open for 1 day only, and we'll talk more about that again in a second. Next, we have the weekly reading reflections, of which there are 6 for the semester. Since there's 7 weeks of material during the semester, I decided to do 6 weekly reading reflections. Because I don't want you to submit one the week of the midterm. During the week of the midterm, I want you to focus your energy on the midterm itself. And then finally, we have a final paper due at the end of the semester, for which you'll also have to submit a rough draft that I will give you feedback on and you'll revise. So in terms of how you should progress through this course during the week, I recommend that you begin by reading the lecture PowerPoints while watching my lecture films from D2L or on YouTube, and then from there you want to proceed through the readings and films. So during the PowerPoint presentations and my lectures, I'll reference the readings and kind of give you a little bit of context, things to think about before engaging with the readings that connect into the major ideas and concepts that I'm laying out in the PowerPoints and lectures. So after you go through those, go through the lectures, go through the readings and the films, and then I recommend that you return to the lectures again and reread through key concepts and theories before doing the written work for the class. I also recommend that you spread your work throughout the week for those of you who taking it at the U of A, and for those of you who are taking it at home, just do it at your own pace. Of course, you can take a week to do the whole class, you can take a year to do the whole class, it doesn't matter. Next, so we're going to go into the specifics of each of the assignments. Again, for those of you who are watching at home on YouTube, you don't need to pay too much attention, but for my U of A students, this is super pertinent for you. So first off, we have our discussions and participation worth 20% of your grade. So, worth 40% of your grade. So for those, it's required that you participate in the D2L discussion section online. It's important that you post regularly and be prepared to discuss course readings, lectures, films, and other media that I might present during the week. And you'll also be required to respond to your fellow students' posts, so that's how we'll kind of generate a discussion. There might be some posts that don't get responses, other ones that multiple people respond to and really start going back and forth between one another, which is what we're looking for. So these will be graded on your ability to synthesize and analyze information from multiple readings, lectures, and films, and to utilize course concepts, and also to pose and answer thoughtful questions to your fellow students. So it's important to recognize again that these aren't reading summaries, they're actually analytic, critical responses to the course material. And the weekly total for posts, which are all due by the end of Saturday of each week, is to post 3 original comments and respond to 3 student comments from your fellow classmates. So the prompts for each week's reading will be posted on the D2L discussion board. You can find them there, or they might be posted below in the description of the video on YouTube. But there might be multiple prompts for each week, no more than 3 total. So in that case, you need to respond to each of the prompts, which means that let's say there's 3 prompts for the week. You're required to do 1 original post in each one of those and respond to 1 of your fellow students in each one of those as well. So that's the way we're kind of going to be working that. Now, if for some reason there's just 1 discussion prompt for the week, then just give 3 original posts on that prompt and respond to 3 comments on that prompt. Pretty straightforward. So, in terms of the length, your original posts are expected to be at least a full paragraph in length, and responses to your classmates can be short. They can be 5, 6, 7 sentences or longer if appropriate. And again, just to reiterate, no discussion posts will be due the week of the midterm. So during the week of the midterm, the only assignment is the midterm itself. Next, we have the weekly reading reflections. So at the end of each week, this is by Sunday at midnight, you will be required to submit to Dropbox to the assignment page on D2L a reading reflection in which you integrate at least 3 sources from that week's readings or films. So lectures are not included in that minimum number. And these reflections should include your own thoughts on the material, as well as a critical analysis of the strengths and weaknesses of what you read or watched. The reflection should be formatted, and this is the case for everything for the course that you might submit, including your final papers. They should be formatted with 1-inch margins, a single-spaced heading, and a double-spaced body. And they should be a minimum of 2 full pages, not to exceed 3. As with the discussion post, you should only include summary information from the readings if you're actually going to be discussing it, and not just for the sake of summarizing the reading. I don't need you to do that. And also at least one of the D2L readings and one of the book readings must be discussed as part of your 3 or more sources. So that means that for every week, right, you have to integrate 3 sources, one of which needs to be a D2L reading, which means a reading outside of your textbook, one of which needs to be a textbook reading, and the final one of which can be on anything else, can be on a film, can be on an additional D2L or an additional book reading. All right. And again, if you have any questions about anything, just email me for clarification. In terms of points, the first 4 reading reflections are going to be worth 3 points each, and the last 2 are going to be worth 4 points each. So to total 20 points of your overall grade coming from reading reflections. And just to reiterate, as with the discussion posts, there is no reading reflection due the week of the midterm, all right? So we're skipping that week. Same way we're skipping the week of spring break, which comes right at the beginning of our semester. The next 2 major things, both of which I'll give more information on later in the semester, are your midterm and final. Your midterm is going to be a timed exam, which is going to be taking place on D2L. It'll include multiple choice and short answer questions and 1 essay question for you to respond to. It'll be, of course, open notes, open book, as it is an online course, and I will give you a study guide closer to the midterm for you to prepare for it. Then finally, worth 25% of your grade is the final exam. So the final exam is going to be a paper. It's going to be a fairly open prompt, and it's going to ask you to apply readings, concepts, films, lectures, etc. Basically everything you can from the course to a topic of your choosing. So, moving on through the syllabus, we're going to go through some course policies. So first off, on email and D2L, I would like it if everybody, if you can, use your arizona.edu email account when emailing me. That helps it also avoid going to spam. During the week, please allow a 24-hour turnaround for me on emails. So if you email me, don't expect to hear back before the same time the next day. And I do have weekends, like most people like to. So from 5 o'clock on Friday through Sunday, I kind of reserve the right to not respond to emails, though I typically do still read them and might get back to them over the weekend anyway. Next, I suggest you read through this portion of the syllabus that talks about the Code of Academic Integrity. But for this class, that code will be enforced very stringently. So every assignment that you have for the course, both the weekly reading reflections and your midterm and your final, all of those have turned on for the assignments. That means it's a plagiarism detector, which will recognize anything from a quote that you didn't put quotation marks around to something that you attempted to summarize simply by changing a word here and there, which it'll still show up. So make sure everything that you're writing is either original or in quotes and properly cited, or properly summarized or paraphrased and cited as well. Any sort of violation to that can lead to a number of different things, ranging from a 0 on the assignment to a 0 in the class to other forms of academic discipline, depending on the degree or severity of the case. If you have any questions about what constitutes plagiarism, feel free to contact me so we can talk and I can help clarify that for you. Next, we have the section on grade challenges. So in here, it basically says that if you would like to if you received a grade that you think should be reevaluated, you can request a reevaluation for that grade. The grade can't be reevaluated on the basis that you think the grade was unfair, right? So if you get a D on an assignment and you just think you did better than that and you think it was unfair, that's not enough of a reason. What you need to do is you need to schedule a meeting with me and provide evidence that you think that you did something on the assignment that I marked you off for, right? So all of the assignments in the class, the final paper, for example, all have rubrics for them that I give out ahead of time, so you can see what I grade on, and I'll give you feedback saying, you know, you lost points for this, this, and this. If you can make an argument that you think you did those things in your paper, your assignment, then I'll reevaluate the grade and potentially raise it. Next, of course, this is a class on gender and women's studies, and as with all courses at the university, it's expected that students engage with one another in a respectful way on our D2L discussion boards. I recognize that everybody comes from different political backgrounds, different identities, be they sexual, racial, gender, otherwise. And of course, in this class, no one here should be intending on trying to insult anyone, trying to discriminate against anyone. So I really want folks to try as much as possible to engage in nuanced, creative, and productive discussions with one another. If there's something said to focus not necessarily on reacting, but on responding in ways that are constructive, and that push the conversation so that people can change the way that they think, right? And to say more about this, what I really think I want to stress is that there's this idea that's kind of out there that circulates really heavily, and we see it in a lot of different forms where people kind of have this idea that, like, okay, they'll say I'm not racist, right? I'm not going to say, okay, not I'm an anti-racist, because being anti-racist is something very different than being just not racist, right? But we'll say, like, a lot of people have this internalized idea. They're like, I'm not racist, right? And they might think that for a number of different reasons. But in our field, right, a lot of people will think that they're not racist because they think they've done a number of things, right, to commit themselves to not being racist that make it so that that's it. They're not racist and they've gotten there, and that's like a final point, right? And so you'll recognize this because sometimes, if somebody says or does something that somebody else finds to be racist, they'll be like, hey, I found that to be offensive, I found that to be racist. And then the reaction of that first person is to be like, well, no, I'm not racist, right? Like, instead of being like, well, to be like, okay, well, if you found this to be racist, if you found this to be offensive, I'm going to think about that, I'm going to listen, and I'm going to apologize for doing something that was racist, right? And I'm also going to get excited about the possibility that this is an opportunity for me to learn something that allows me to evolve and develop and progress what my anti-racism looks like, right? So I, for example, as a white person, right, who considers himself to be anti-racist, right, encounter situations now and again where somebody will be like, well, you did this thing, and I consider it to be racist. And naturally, that can be something that your first reaction is this kind of like ego-based reaction to it. But I try, though I fail, of course, now and again, I try as much as possible to be like, okay, well, I should immediately be very self-reflexive and be like, it's impossible that I, as a white person, can know everything that there is to know about what anti-racism is, about how racism is experienced. So therefore, I need to assume that, like, this person's knowledge is important, is valuable, to listen to that knowledge and to think, what can I do differently, right? In addition to apologizing. But in that moment, then that kind of allows, at least for me, to get excited that I'm getting this opportunity, right? To be able to develop what being not a racist is, right? So I say this to link it back to the discussion boards online, to be like, okay, well, if somebody says something that bothers you, or if somebody calls you out, let's say, for doing something, saying something that bothered them, right? Rather than reacting, try and think about ways to respond that allow everybody to develop new and better ways of being in the world and of thinking, right? So, moving on, in terms of resources, feel free to contact me about anything, any questions for the class, but also as somebody to talk to about any issues you might be dealing with that relate to gender and women's studies, be they personal, professional, academic, or otherwise. In terms of accessibility and accommodations, it's the university's and my goal that everything that we do is as accessible as possible. So if either through you or through the DRC you want to contact me about any questions about access and accommodation, feel free to. You can do that over email, of course, or through the DRC. Either work perfectly well. So now we're going to come back around and we're going to look really briefly at the course schedule. So for those of you who are watching on YouTube, this is a good time to tune back in because this is kind of like the order of the major ideas sections of the course and the readings. So the class is broken into 7 weeks if you're taking it at the U of A. And we're going to begin by our first unit by talking about power, representation, and parenthetical popular culture, right? So I say parenthetical popular because I like to focus a bit more on popular culture, both as something that's accessible, that's relevant, that's modern, contemporary, but that also has a lot of material available just out there, be it online or otherwise, to access and learn more about these things beyond just what we're talking about and reading about in the course. So we begin with a series of readings that relate to these kind of major ideas about power, about representation, which we'll learn about, which helps us think about the ways in which knowledge and images and other cultural artifacts are connected to power. And we're going to talk broadly about culture and how we define it and what popular culture is. So in so doing, we're also going to cover a little introduction to gender as a major important concept for this course, and talk about social construction and a few other things that relate to gender. The second week of this first section, we're going to be looking specifically at two different kind of identity categories and ways in which they're enforced. So first we're going to look at kind of this major concept of normativity. And we're going to look at it in relationship to transphobia and how transphobia manifests culturally in the United States and in the West. And then we're also going to look at, with a lecture called The Cultural Politics of Whiteness, at the various ways in which whiteness, broadly written, is constructed and reinforced and made to be valuable in U.S. popular culture. So then we get to move on to one of my favorite units, which is Unit 2, and it's on counterculture as resistance, right? So if Unit 1 was focused on the ways in which hegemony or kind of mainstream ideologies about gender are promoted through popular culture, this section is looking at the ways in which culture or various cultural practices of consumption and production can be used to generate resistance against those kind of hegemonic ideas around gender, right? And not just around gender, but around race, around sexuality, around religion, around nationality. So our first week in this section kind of looks at a quick introduction to counterculture and how it's been talked about, and then it looks specifically at kind of various forms of queer performance, specifically camp, and looks at this concept of strategic representation, right? So various ways in which what we talked about earlier, representation is this thing that's used to kind of do harm and reinforce negative ideas about gender, about race, sex, etc. And now we're looking at ways in which you can actually use representational tactics, right, or what we might call representational politics, in order to promote progressive and even radical messages. So then in the second unit of this section, we're going to be looking more at some things that I really love to study, in particular hip hop. We're also going to be looking at punk, right, as these two kind of countercultures or subcultures, and we're going to be looking at artivism, right? So the various ways in which art and activism come together, which is really important to thinking about counterculture in the U.S. and the West. And also we're going to be doing a little bit of a mid-semester recap at that point ahead of the midterm, where we link various things in this semester back to looking at focusing at the 2016 U.S. elections and social media, which I think should be a fun, interesting way of thinking back and reapplying some of the concepts we had talked about from the first half of the semester to something that's so recent, you know, with the 2016 elections. At that point, we're going to be having our midterm. That's going to come at the end of that week for those of you at the UA. And then we're going to dive right into kind of this big third unit, and that's going to lead us through the end of this course. So this big third unit is all about kind of challenging this concept of the West, right, and where the borders of that are. And when I say the borders, I mean the political borders, the cultural borders, the theoretical borders, the geographic borders, all these various ways of thinking about borders, right, ultimately to really press this idea that being inside Western culture no longer means being inside the geographical boundaries of the West. So we're going to start that unit by looking at this kind of major concept of Orientalism, this practice of Orientalism, and link it back to this major kind of umbrella term that we're going to be using a lot in this third unit, which is about cultural imperialism, right? Which I'll say briefly is about the various ways now in this modern moment where relations of imperialism, relations of colonialism are extended, right, in the absence of a formal colonial relationship, or in the absence of military occupation, etc., but are extended nonetheless in terms of their effects, right, extended in terms of cultural value systems, extended in terms of economic disparities between the East and the West, or if you're looking at it economically, the North and the South, right? So that cultural imperialism is about the ways in which cultural practices have actually extended the relations of imperialism or colonialism in the absence of formal colonial governmental and military relations. So we're then going to be looking in that same week at kind of looking at the war going on in Syria, looking at Syrian refugeeism, and finding ways to link those back to both kind of this concept of cultural imperialism, but also to the various ways in which kind of activism is taking place among Syrian migrants today. Next, in the second week of that unit, we're going to be looking at kind of the ways in which global capitalism and gender intersect in the Middle East, and we'll be looking outside of the Middle East too a bit in that lecture. And then we're also going to be looking at a section that focuses on what I describe as being the kind of transnational circuits of whiteness. So the various ways in which white culture, right, or whiteness broadly speaking, that we'll have talked about earlier in the semester, the various ways in which whiteness kind of spreads transnationally through various circuits that we might describe as being akin to cultural imperialism, but the various ways in which whiteness is becoming privileged all over the world. And then finally, the last week of the course, we're going to be looking at this kind of body of theory, this body of scholarship called Transnational Feminist Cultural Studies, which will be a way, hopefully, of kind of like linking together a lot of concepts that we've talked about through this semester, but also a way of linking a lot of different places, right? I'm talking about different geographic places around the world for how we can think about them as kind of existing in this kind of common cultural space or space of cultural exchange. And then finally, I'm going to round the class out by focusing on Arabic hip-hop culture and transnational activism to look at kind of Middle Eastern hip-hop as this good example of transnational feminist cultural studies, which is, if we're being completely honest, exactly what I do in my day-to-day research and writing. So, towards that last week of the semester, in the middle of that last week, you'll have to submit a rough draft of your final paper. I'll give you feedback pretty quickly, and then you'll have another week or so to rewrite, revise, and submit a final draft of your paper for the UA students. So that rounds out the discussion of the syllabus. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, you can feel free to close this video at this point and just look back through the syllabus again. For those of you who are UA students, stay with me for a moment because I'm going to pull up now the D2L page for the class, and we're going to go over that together. So, if you go to your D2L and click on the link for our class, you should come up to the main page, which has a little announcement about the course, and really just the same summary that you get at the beginning of the syllabus about what the course is focused on. So, if you look at the top, this main bar going across the page, you're going to see a number of different sections. So I want you to look and find this tab that says Content first, the Content section, and click there. So if you go there, you'll see kind of along the left side a table of contents that has different sections on it. The first one, syllabus and assignment prompts, is where you'll find the syllabus already posted. And during the semester, you'll also find the midterm study guide posted there and the final essay prompt posted there as well. Then in the next section, you'll find all of the PowerPoint lectures. So these are the slideshows that you'll want to download. And then you'll also find the lecture videos in the section beneath that. So again, you want to watch the videos while you're going through the slideshow on your computer. The next section has all of the course readings in it, and these are all the readings that are in the syllabus but not in the textbook. And just to reiterate, these are totally required readings. They're not optional, and that'll be tested through the fact that you have to cite them in your essays, you have to cite them in your weekly reading reflections, and in your posts as well. Then finally, the last section is films, which you should find links to all the films there that we're watching during the semester. And also, most of these films are hosted through this streaming service called Canopy Streaming, which the university subscribes to. So I recommend you take some time and just peruse that website and check out all the tons of different amazing documentaries they have on there. They have documentaries in just about every subject area, and most of them are pretty recent and pretty high quality, so it's definitely worth checking out. All right, back to D2L. Next, if you go to this class list tab, you'll find a list of all of the emails of the entire class, including myself. So you can use it to communicate with individual students. You can use it to communicate with the entire class, to ask questions, for help, anything you might want to. If you don't know my email address or you don't have your syllabus with you, you can always just sign on to the D2L page and go and click the box next to my name and send an email just to me. Also, if for any reason you want to email the entire class, there's another link at the top that says email class list, and you can just click that and a window will pop up from which you can email everybody in the class, including myself. Alright, the next tab you'll see up there is discussions. So if you click on the discussions tab, you'll see that we have 6 discussions on there, week 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, and 7. So again, that's because week 4 is our week of the midterm. There's no discussions that week, so you're not going to submit any online posts. You should also notice that each of the discussion boards is only open for 1 week. So they're open from Sunday early morning until Saturday at midnight, right? So that means you do need to get all your discussion posts in by the end of Saturday. But it also means you can't go ahead and start posting on discussion boards for next week, right? You have to stay at that same pace. There's no way to finish out the class ahead of time. All right, next you'll have the assignments page, and on there you'll see 8 different folders. The first 6 are each of your reading reflections, right, that you'll have to submit during the semester. Again, none during the week of the midterm. And then you'll have 1 folder for the rough draft of your final paper, and then 1 folder for your final paper. So that's where you're going to go to submit all of those assignments. And again, all of them have Turnitin turned on, so I'll be able to review for any sort of issues about plagiarism, but also not just looking for plagiarism as a sort of like, like evil guy just trying to find cases of plagiarism, but I'm also looking to find ways to give you advice, to help you out, to make you better writers. So I'm not going to come down hard on minor cases of plagiarism. I'll give you the advice just to make sure that you avoid that in the future. The next tab is the tab for your grades that you can go to and check to see your progress as the semester goes on. I'll try as hard as possible to make sure everything is graded within 1 week of its submission. The next tab is the quizzes tab. That's going to be where you'll find the midterm quiz come the middle of the semester. It's not up there yet because the quiz hasn't been written yet. But it will be up there for you to take on that one particular day of the semester. And yeah, that kind of rounds it out for the D2L page. So go through the different tabs, familiarize yourself with everything, email me with any questions that you might have, because I am here to answer them all. So that also rounds out this first introductory video for the class. So feel free to rewatch it as much as you need to, review the syllabus, review the online D2L page, purchase the book if you haven't done so, again online or on the in the bookstore after the middle of February. And I look forward to the 6th of March when we'll get this class underway. Alrighty.